Hi everyone, my name is Jacqueline and today I'm going to talk to you about my experience with Springboard. So I was where you guys were at about a year ago in 2019, researching different UX UI bootcamps and seeing if this was the correct or right career change for me and how that really kind of fit into my life and whether I could take the risk and go into school again, you know? So I was researching different bootcamps. I did Springboard in 2019, ended in early 2020, and yeah, and now I'm a full-fledged full-time UX designer. I found a job fairly quickly after graduating bootcamp. So, and you know, for some reason or for somehow people have been finding me on LinkedIn, and you know, I get a couple of questions and people reaching out to me a month, just asking me about my experience and asking me how my experience was in bootcamp and why I chose Springboard. And I'm by not any means sponsored by them or anyone put me up to this, but truly wanted to kind of share my experience. And yeah, not that I'm anyone particularly important, but I do feel that people have really valid questions. I would just love to help anyone who's going through the same process as I was. So this video will not be about breaking down the Springboard curriculum. I think you could find a lot of that just researching online, but more so of my pros and cons and the experiences that I had with Springboard and how that kind of translate to my work now, right? Well, I'll give you a little context about Springboard. Well, Springboard, I was researching different programs about a year ago. I was also working full-time. I was a fashion designer before I made a career change. And so I was working full-time and I wasn't willing to completely quit my job. I had to know whether the bootcamps that I'm taking were flexible with my time. Were they self-paced? Could they be conducted online? Because in terms of feasibility, there was just no way that I could have physically attended classes. So boot camps like General Assembly or the UCI, I forgot what their program was called, but UCI offered a program. Those are out of question. I could not attend physically. So, you know, flexibility was very important to me. As you're researching these programs or these boot camps, that their offerings were very similar across the board, which made it very tricky to know which boot camp was right for me. And for one, Springboard offered one-on-one mentors, so that was something that I knew was important to me. I wanted someone to download to me some real-life experience. Not only that, but I always tell students, when you pick your mentor, and they do give you an opportunity to kind of pick or kind of create a preference in terms of what kind of specialization you actually want to go into, to be very specific. So I tell students to be very, very specific with the type of mentor that they want. So for me, it was, you know, my mentor had to be at least a veteran, like doing this for 10 years. I will not have a mentor who's only been doing this for like 3 years or 2 years. Not that those people don't bring any value or valuable knowledge, but because there's just quite a difference when you are mentored under someone who's been doing this for 10 years and has had experience in managing teams and has been experienced, you know, they just have more experience, and you'll know by talking to them. Yes, the one-on-one mentorship, extremely, I would say, the most valuable asset a bootcamp can offer you. I mean, the lessons are given, but a really good mentor could make or break your experience. So make sure that you have good chemistry with your mentor and you feel that they are challenging you as well as encouraging you. And what's great about Springboard, and I'm sure with other bootcamps, is that you have the opportunity to switch mentors if you feel like it's not a good fit. On top of that, just to speak into the type of support that you do have at Springboard is once you start beginning your job search process or thinking about the more career-oriented projects, they do have career counselors for you. And I had an amazing career counselor as well as a mentor, but he really helped me through a lot of tough times in the job search process. So once you're done with the program, you transition to the job search process. So your career counselor, you should be meeting up quite often, and I wanted to meet up with him bi-weekly so he could like check up on me, reassess where I was with certain job opportunities, and create, like, me and him, we would create a job strategy. And to be honest, it was really good having someone to be a soundboard, because I honestly, it's a really tough time. You guys know it. And having someone to talk to and having someone to ground you and say, hey, you know, this is pretty normal. Like, not getting calls right away is pretty normal. So I think that was just really awesome. So during that time, I was debating between, I believe, Springboard, Career Foundry, and Design Lab. But I think what made me choose Springboard at the end was their IDP project. So as you know, all these boot camps have projects that are portfolio oriented, right? So all these projects are, you know, self prompts and prompts that they give you, but there's this one project at the end where they actually pair you up with a actual startup company. So I think that goes back to my worry was when I was getting into this was, could this really land me a job? How applicable was this? Having that real life experience really was cherry on top for me, and I was immediately sold when I found that out. Because why not? You're having this real life experience that you don't necessarily need to apply for or convince a company that you're really good at something. So you get paired up. So how it worked was you kind of write down your preference with the industry that you want to get into. So for me, I wrote down mental health, and wellness industry. I didn't necessarily get paired up with that type of industry. I got paired up with an ed tech startup company from India. And most of the companies are very, very startup-y. You'll find that the companies that they pair you up with are in the very, very beginning stages of their companies, so they need a lot of help. And the other question was, did it help you land the job? I would say, I mean, I can't deny that it did. Obviously, it helped me create a very competitive portfolio. My job search process was about 2 months before I landed my job. Yeah, my camera stopped. So where did I leave off? Yeah, so Springboard was really good in keeping that structure, because building portfolio takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of motivation. So they had that structure for me to really build out a competitive portfolio. So that was great. You have to yourself put in a lot of work into networking, into being very proactive in your job search in order to get that job. I mean, you're not going to graduate with this portfolio, start sending out job applications and hope that, you know, you're gonna get the job. Like, it took a lot of, I mean, I had a really good job strategy, to be honest. I could get more into that later because I feel like I have so much to share on that and how I was able to land a lot of interviews. But yeah, I mean, my point is that it takes a lot of effort. I think Springboard school in general can only help you so much, but it's in your own hands. So the other question that I always get is, so how does it translate to my job? I would say what you learn in school and what you're doing in my job is completely different. And I don't mean that the knowledge that I gained wasn't able to like transfer over. I would say that the type of work you do is so different. You're just in this different environment. Well, it might be different for me because I work with enterprise products and I work as a consulting company. So that's much different from my portfolio, which was a lot of consumer products and very like exploratory and creative projects. So it is much different. So I'm just speaking from my experience that it is a lot different. When you're you know, getting paid to do this. There's a lot more pressure. You're not just executing things based off of your own understanding. There's so many components to it. Like, you are designing for business, you're coming into something that is not necessarily new, and so you have to adhere to the current structure, the current process, the current design system. So it's not as creative and not as exploratory. You're solving real problems, right? And you don't get to choose and pick what problems you get to solve. It certainly is part of the job. But of course, know that when you start working, there's so much more to learn. And with that said, I will jump into the cons. I don't think there were much cons, but if I were to say that there were cons, here's one. So repetitive prompts. And in my interviews, when I go into interviews, I never talk about bootcamp. I don't say anything about bootcamp. It's in my resume, but I won't bring it up until somebody does. Certain people who you know, still have a stigma around bootcamp. My boss certainly didn't, but there's other people, hiring managers that I have talked to who have a stigma around bootcamp. So I've noticed when I was looking at other students' portfolio that honestly we have the same prompts and we have the same outcomes, designs, and projects. So, and I remember someone saying that they could tell when they see a student's portfolio because it's very cookie cutter, and I think that's what they mean, is that they'll see the same projects as they're going through these portfolios. So that was something that I wanted to avoid. But in certain cases in Springboard, it wasn't avoidable. The second thing was, now that I'm working, I kind of, in hindsight, wish there were certain topics that they went over better. And I feel like that they didn't go into more granularity of, as in there are certain topics that they maybe just kind of described in theory, described as concept, but in fact you kind of need to know a lot more about that to do a good job. I don't know if the program has changed, so maybe they've done a better job at this, but for example, whiteboarding. During my day, when they had lessons on whiteboarding, you kind of read of like what a whiteboard entails and what is expected, but it was like an article or two. And I don't know about you, but I learned by emulation and I learned by watching people do things. So reading how to do a whiteboard, and whiteboard means it's part of the interview. Sometimes it's part of the interview process where they give you a prompt and you're supposed to design out loud on this like whiteboard. So you know, that sort of thing is sort of hard to read about, but not actually have watched and seen it yourself. And that's something you could ask your mentor, but to be honest, to have, like, if you YouTube, you could YouTube people going through whiteboard challenges. I felt like that was more of a better learning type of source than reading about it. So that's one. Another thing was, to be honest, like, I do a lot of creating design systems at my work. During the time, I think Springboard, I mean, of course, they went over what design system is and what it entails. And what they have you do with your projects is create a design guide, or yeah, basically a brand guide, which is different than a design system. Brand guide, I wouldn't say it doesn't get granular enough in terms of the components, different states, why that's important. I mean, to be honest, I can't, if I, as a designer now, receive a design guide with colors and maybe how the button looks like with like one state and the logo, that to me kind of tells me nothing and doesn't really help me build application. I've learned that more on the job and noticed, okay, now I'm looking back at my projects, yikes, like the things that I created was not, I guess not realistic. Like I would literally go back and create a better one knowing what I know now. So, you know, there's type of things that I felt like, okay, they could have stayed more in because those are really, really important, but they kind of just, like I said before, go things over in concepts So in my head, they're like, okay, I mean, I know what that means. That must be great. But no, in fact, there's a deeper level and deeper understanding that is needed in certain areas. I mean, I hope that was helpful. I'm sure there's a lot of other questions that I'm skipping over, but I mean, these were the most common questions I get on LinkedIn. I would love to, another part I would love to talk about is sort of my job search process and my job search strategy, and how I was able to land a job quickly after bootcamp. So I'll just say that for another time, or else this video is gonna be extremely long. Or maybe no one watches this and it ends here. All right, so yeah, well, thank you so much for watching this far. If you have any questions, leave a comment below, and I'll try to get to them ASAP. All right, bye guys.